Echoes of Ash, Part 6.
Echoes of Ash, the Grey Silence. Victor's sacrifice bought them minutes, but the cost of his blood was absolute. As the heavy subterranean doors sealed shut, locking the chairman's enforcers inside the tunnel with him, Elena's scream was swallowed by the dark. She was entirely devastated, paralyzed by the sudden brutal loss. But Marina knew that out here, grief was a luxury they could not afford. Clutching her baby Mira tight against her chest, Marina grabbed Elena by the arm, physically dragging her away from the echoing gunfire. They scrambled blindly down the claustrophobic corridor and clawed their way up the rusted rungs of an emergency hatch, desperate to reach the surface. They shoved the heavy metal grate aside and emerged into the blinding expanse of the wasteland, only to find their nightmare waiting for them. The deafening mechanical roar of a Spire dropship rattled the bones of the old world. It hovered aggressively overhead, its massive thrusters kicking up violent clouds of gray dirt. They hadn't escaped the attack on the hub. They had walked directly into the crosshairs. A heavy hunter-seeker array descended from the ship's belly, unleashing a piercing blue-teal tracking beam. It swept across the ash like a cold mechanical eye, hunting for the survivors. Elena scrambled for cover, collapsing against the rusted shell of an old-world transport car, but sheer panic immediately overtook her. Her hands flew to her throat. The violent escape had dislodged the seal on her respirator. The filters were failing. The deadly, microscopic silica ash of the wasteland was flooding straight into her mask. She was choking. Elena gasped for air, but her burning lungs were met only with dry, abrasive dust. It was a terrifying health crisis in the absolute worst possible moment. Marina crouched beside her, shielding Mira's face from the wind, her eyes wide with terror. She was utterly helpless to intervene. The blue-teal light was sweeping closer. If Elena coughed, if she made a single desperate sound as she suffocated, the enforcers would drop from the sky and slaughter them all. With trembling, frantic fingers, Elena wrestled with the jammed mechanism of her mask. She twisted the secondary valve with every ounce of strength she had left. A sharp hiss pierced the air. The seal snapped shut, locking out the wasteland, and a heavy rush of cool, restorative oxygen flooded her burning lungs. She squeezed her eyes shut, pulling in deep, ragged breaths as the agonizing trauma in her chest finally began to subside. But the relief was shattered an instant later. The sweeping blue-teal beam stopped directly over their rusted hiding place. The sensor had registered an anomaly. It was getting a lock. The deep, terrifying hum of the dropship's weapons began to charge. They had been found. Death was seconds away. And then, the wasteland intervened. A massive wall of shifting winds slammed into the dunes, violently whipping the atmosphere into a blinding, impenetrable silica ash storm. The swirling, chaotic tempest of gray dust swallowed them whole. The thick wall of heavy particulate completely obstructed the dropship's sensors, scattering the blue-teal tracking beam into useless, refracted light. The ship roared overhead, its automated systems blinded and frustrated, entirely unable to pierce the heavy shroud of the storm. As the dropship finally banked away, abandoning the pursuit and disappearing back into the smog, Marina and Elena sat trembling in the howling wind. As the violent dust battered against their rusted shelter, they realized the profound, terrifying irony of their survival. In their darkest moment, they had been hidden by the tempest. They were saved by the very same suffocating ash that had just tried to kill them. But the storm that shielded them also threatened to bury them. They could not stay. Marina pulled herself to her feet, adjusting her heavy cloak to protect Mira from the stinging wind. She reached down, grabbing Elena's gloved hand, and pulled the still trembling woman up from the dirt. The dropship was gone, but the wasteland was endless. Together, they stepped out from the rusted shell of the transport car, leaning their weight into the gale. Before them stretched a frozen, endless ocean of dead dunes, littered with the colossal, skeletal remains of industrial giants. They walked in silence, dwarfed by massive, hollowed-out pipes that bowed into the sand like the ribcages of dead leviathans. There were no safe havens out here. There was only the grueling, agonizing march through the dust, side by side, as the two women and the child vanished entirely into the gray silence.